Why don't we feel the earth moving?
Even though we constantly move at a high rate of speed, we don't feel it. Just as we don't feel the speed at which we're flying in an airplane or driving in a car. It's only when there is a sudden change in speed that we notice. And if the Earth made such a change, we would certainly feel it.
How many volcanoes does Iceland have?
Iceland, formed by volcanoes along the mid-Atlantic ridge, is home to more than 100 volcanoes. Of these, more than 20 have erupted over the past few centuries.
What is a census?
A census is an enumeration, or counting, of a population. The information from a census is used to help governments determine where to provide services. Based on the demographics of the population. Information about age, gender, number of children, race, languages spoken, education. Commuting distance, salary, and other demographic variables is common in a census. This information is compiled and provided to government agencies and is usually accessible to the general public. In the United States and most other developed nations, a census takes place once every decade. The Constitution of the United States requires a census to be taken every 10 years. In order to create districts and determine the number of members of Congress each state is able to send to the House of Representatives.
Kilimanjaro formed?
Mt. Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa at 19,340 feet. 5,895 meters, was formed as a volcano, but is now dormant. The mountain is located in northeastern Tanzania and was first climbed in 1889 by German geographer Hans Meyer and Austrian climber Ludwig Pertzkeller.
Which African country is the world's leading producer of cocoa beans?
Côte d'Ivoire, also known as the Ivory Coast. Named for the large amount of ivory collected from elephant herds that once roamed the country. Produces 37.4% of the world's cocoa beans, the beans used to make chocolate. It produces more than 1.3 million tons each year. Ghana produces another 20% of the world's total. And both Cameroon and Nigeria contribute 10% to the total production of cocoa in the world. This means that nearly 70% of the world's cocoa beans are grown in Africa.
How long did Japan occupy and colonize Korea?
Japan began its forced occupation of Korea in 1910 and left the country at the end of World War II in 1945. During the occupation, many Koreans were put into forced labor, slavery, and military conscription. It is estimated that between 200,000 and 800,000 people died at the hands of the Japanese in Korea and the Manchuria region.
Where does cocaine come from?
Cocaine is produced from the coca plant, which was originally domesticated by the Incas. Coca paste from the coca plant is refined to make cocaine. Illegal cartels and individuals in Colombia and other South American countries are major exporters of cocaine, especially to the United States.
What time is it at the North and South Poles?
Because time zones get narrower the farther you get from the equator. Time zones would be very thin near the North and South Poles. To simplify things, researchers living in Antarctica use Coordinated Universal Time. UTC, which is the time at Greenwich, England.
Which state has the most boat registrations?
Florida has 946,000 registered boats, followed by Michigan, with 945,000, and California, with 894,000.
How can I find the exact time?
Today, you can go to many websites on the internet and find the exact time. Just search the word time, and you will see links for the exact time. Your computer also is set to automatically update time. So your desktop time is usually accurate to within a few milliseconds.
What were the results of the 2006 National Geographic Roper Public Affairs Geographic Literacy Study?
The 2006 study is the latest in a series of surveys commissioned by the National Geographic Society, with the most recent previous wave being conducted in 2002. The countries that scored highest in the poll were Sweden, Italy, and France. The United States and Mexico scored the lowest.
What is the longest river in the world?
Egypt's famous Nile River is the longest in the world. It is more than 4,100 miles, 6,597 kilometers, long from its sources in the Ethiopian highlands. The source of the portion of the Nile called the Blue Nile, and Lake Victoria, the source of the White Nile. The Nile Valley is the center of contemporary and ancient Egyptian civilization. Following the Nile in length are the Amazon, in Brazil, the Missouri-Mississippi, United States. The Chang, or Yangtze, China, the Huang, or Yellow, China, and the Obi, Russia.
Was Cuba ever a part of the United States?
The United States went to war against Spain in 1898 to assist Cubans who were rebelling against Spanish rule. The United States took control of Cuba during the Spanish-American War in 1898 and held it until 1902, when Cuba was granted independence. The 3-year military occupation by the United States ended with an agreement that the United States would be allowed to lease Guantanamo Bay, which the United States still uses as a naval base.
What is the holiest site in Mecca?
The most important site in Mecca is the Great Mosque, called the Haram. It is located in the center of the city and houses the sacred black stone, Kaaba. Muslims around the world face the black stone during prayer.
What is the difference between relative and absolute location?
There are two different ways to describe where a place is located: relative location and absolute location. Relative location is a description of location using the relation of one place to another. For instance, using relative location to describe where the local video store is. You might say that it's on Main Street, just past the high school. Absolute location describes the location of a place by using grid coordinates. Most commonly latitude and longitude. For instance, the local video store would be described as being located at 23 degrees 23 minutes 57 seconds north and 118 degrees 55 minutes 2 seconds west.
What is the official neckwear of Arizona?
Like an official flower or animal, each state can add additional official symbols for their state. The official neckwear of Arizona is the bolo tie.
What is continentality?
Areas of a continent that are distant from an ocean, such as the central United States, experience greater extremes in temperature than do places that are closer to an ocean. These inland areas experience continentality. It might be very hot during the summer, but it can also get very cold in winter. Areas close to oceans experience moderating effects from the ocean that reduce the range in temperatures.
Why are the Blue Nile and White Nile rivers both called Niles?
The Nile River begins as two separate rivers, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile begins its flow from Lake Victoria in eastern Africa, and the Blue Nile originates in the Ethiopian highlands. The Blue Nile and the White Nile converge in Khartoum, the capital of the Sudan, and form the Nile River, which continues onto the Mediterranean.
What are the Apennines?
The Apennines are a mountain range extending from northern to southern Italy for approximately 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers. The highest point is a place called Corno Grande, which reaches a summit at 9,500 feet, 2,912 meters.
What is one of the only countries in the world to provide constitutional protection to gays, lesbians, and bisexuals?
South Africa's 1996 constitution protects gays, lesbians, and bisexuals against discrimination in both the public and private sectors. The Equality Clause in the Bill of Rights protects people from discrimination based on race, gender, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth.
How many visitors come to the United States every year?
Approximately 51.1 million people visited the United States from abroad. Foreign travel in the United States grows at approximately 4% per year. And sales related to travel in the United States, which is counted as exports, is larger than purchases of American agricultural products and cars combined. Tourists and other visitors contribute $107 billion per year to the U.S. economy.
How did factories in the USSR end up on the east side of the country?
During World War II, the USSR enacted their scorched earth policy as Germany invaded from the west. The scorched earth policy involved moving everything they could to the east and burning what they couldn't move. Factories were disassembled, shipped by train to the region near the Ural Mountains, and reassembled to keep Soviet industry working. The Ural region is still a major manufacturing area for Russia.
What is the highest navigable lake in the world?
Lake Titicaca, located on the border between Peru and Bolivia, is the highest navigable lake in the world, with an elevation of 12,500 feet, 3,810 meters. Though there are higher lakes in the world, Lake Titicaca is the highest one in which boats can sail. Lake Titicaca was the center of Incan civilization.
What is Bollywood?
Known as Bollywood, Mumbai, India, previously called Bombay, is the world's movie capital. The entertainment industry in India produces more than 1,000 films annually, which is much more than the United States.
Why do people live in floodplains?
People have lived in floodplains for thousands of years. Fertile land for agriculture lines the floodplain, and the nearby water source makes life easier. Unfortunately, when the river does flood, these communities are severely damaged and people suffer. Hazard mitigation, such as levees, dams, dikes and other structures, attempt to limit damage during floods. Sometimes, when the structures fail, such as a levee breaking, large areas are inundated with water. Inhabitants of floodplains must balance the risks with the rewards of living in such an unpredictable environment.
Where is the world's tallest waterfall?
Angel Falls, in Venezuela, is the world's tallest waterfall at 3,212 feet, 979 meters. American pilot Jimmy Angel discovered the waterfall and named it after himself in 1935. At the time of the discovery, the falls were known to indigenous peoples such as the Pemen for thousands of years. They called the falls Kirpakupe Meru, which means waterfall of the deepest place.
Why is there a tiny piece of Russia in the middle of Eastern Europe?
The important seaport of Kaliningrad, wedged between Poland and Lithuania, was annexed by the USSR at the end of World War II. Though once the capital of East Prussia and ethnically German, the Soviets quickly evicted the Germans and replaced them with ethnic Russians. In 1991 many of the autonomous republics within the USSR gained independence, though Kaliningrad lies west of these new countries. Its inhabitants are ethnically Russian and thus remained part of the Russian state.
What are the largest and smallest counties in the United States?
San Bernardino County in California is the largest, at 20,000 square miles, 51,800 square kilometers. It stretches from metropolitan Los Angeles to the Nevada/Arizona border. The smallest county in the United States is Kalawao, Hawaii, at 13 square miles. 33.7 square kilometers, which has a very small population of only 130.
Where is all the water?
Over 97% of the world's water lies in the oceans and is too salty to drink or to irrigate crops with. Except when the water is cleaned through a desalination plant, which is not done very often. About 2.8% of the world's water supply is fresh water. Of that 2.8%, about 2% is frozen in glaciers and ice sheets. This leaves only about 0.8% of the world's water that is accessible through aquifers, streams, lakes, and in the atmosphere. The water that we use primarily comes from this 0.8%.
What is the tallest skyscraper in the world?
The Burj Dubai skyscraper is currently the tallest structure. When completed, it will reach a height of over 2,064 feet, 629 meters. It has surpassed the CN Tower in Toronto, Canada, which since 1976 was the world's tallest building at 1,815 feet, 553.3 meters.
Where is the northernmost rainforest?
Juneau, the capital of Alaska, is in the middle of one of the largest and most northerly rainforests in the world, which is located within the Chugach National Forest and Chugach State Park. Others extend to the northern regions of Japan and Siberia, Russia.
What is inside the Earth?
At the very center of the Earth is a dense and solid inner core of iron and other minerals that is about 1,800 miles, 2,896 kilometers, wide. Surrounding the inner core is a liquid, molten, outer core. Surrounding the outer core is the mantle, which makes up the bulk of the interior of the Earth. The mantle is composed of 3 layers. 2 outer layers are solid and the inner layer, the asthenosphere, is a layer of rock that is easily moved and shaped.
What should I do when a tornado approaches?
Try to get to the lowest level of the building, unless you are in a mobile home or outdoors. In which case you should seek a sturdy and safe shelter. Go to the center of the room and hide under a sturdy piece of furniture. Stay away from windows, hold onto the leg of a table or something else stable. And protect your head and neck with your arms.
What type of rocks are formed by lava?
Igneous rocks are formed when liquid magma under the surface of the earth, or lava on the surface of the earth, cools and hardens into rock.
Why was the border between the Yemen and Saudi Arabia dashed on maps?
In the sandy desert between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, the border between the two countries was in dispute. A treaty signed in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in July of 2000 resolved the conflict. And maps no longer show a dashed line between the two countries.
What is El Niño?
El Niño, also known as ENSO or the El Niño Southern Oscillation, is a large patch of warm water that moves between the eastern and western Pacific Ocean near the equator. When the warm water, about 1 degree Celsius warmer than normal, of El Niño is near South America. The warm water affects the weather in the southwestern United States by increasing rainfall, and is responsible for changes in the weather throughout the world. El Niño lasts for about 4 years in the eastern Pacific Ocean and then returns to the western Pacific near Indonesia for another 4 years. When the warm water is in the western Pacific, it is known as La Niña, the opposite of El Niño. When La Niña is in action, we have normal climatic conditions.
How many American troops are stationed in South Korea?
Currently, 22,500 U.S. troops still occupy South Korea, but only 160 are actually stationed in the demilitarized zone.
How many countries named Congo are there?
There are 2 countries named Congo, and just to make things a little more confusing, they're neighbors. The similarity between the names of the two: the Democratic Republic of the Congo and its western neighbor, the Republic of the Congo, makes distinguishing them a little difficult. In 1908 the Democratic Republic of the Congo was named Belgian Congo, in 1960 it was called Republic of the Congo. In 1964 it became People's Republic of the Congo, in 1966 it was called Democratic Republic of the Congo. In 1971 it was called Zaire, and finally, in 1997, again became the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Who is an Ayatollah?
The title of Ayatollah was originally used for outstanding Shiite scholars. But in 1979 Iran went through a period of fundamentalism and replaced the secular Shah. The former leader, with the Ayatollah, a religious and political leader of the nation. Under the Ayatollah's rule, traditional social values were mandated.
Are lines of longitude and latitude all the same length?
No, they are not. Only the lines of longitude are of equal length. Each line of longitude equals half of the circumference of the Earth because each extends from the North Pole to the South Pole. The lines of latitude are not all equal in length. Since they are each complete circles that remain equidistant from each other. The lines of latitude vary in size from the longest at the equator to the smallest, which are just single points, at the North and South Poles.
What is one of the only countries in the world to provide constitutional protection to gays, lesbians, and bisexuals?
South Africa's 1996 constitution protects gays, lesbians, and bisexuals against discrimination in both the public and private sectors. The Equality Clause in the Bill of Rights protects people from discrimination based on race, gender, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth.
What is a good way to learn where places are?
The best way to learn about places that you have heard of is to look them up in an updated atlas. An atlas is a collection of maps bound in a book. It may include additional information, such as illustrations, statistical tables, topography, and other important information about a place or places. If you like to use the internet, you may try to enter the place in the search box at your favorite search engine, and then click on the results. You will be surprised by the amount of information you can find.
How large is Brazil?
Brazil makes up just under 50% of the land area of the entire South American continent. It is the world's fifth largest country, with 3.3 million square miles. 8.5 million square kilometers of territory.
What is Caprivi's finger?
Caprivi's finger is the name of the narrow strip of land that protrudes from the northeast corner of the otherwise compact country of Namibia. The land was acquired by German Chancellor George Leo von Caprivi from the British in 1890 in order for Namibia, known then as German Southwest Africa, to have access to the Zambezi River. This strip of land is approximately 300 miles, 480 kilometers long, but no more than 65 miles, 105 kilometers, at its widest.
What makes Brazilian automobiles run?
Over half of Brazilian automobiles use alternatives to petroleum known as gasohol and ethanol. Gasohol is made from sugarcane and ethanol is made from alcohol. The two fuels are much less expensive than petroleum-based gasoline.
What was the Maginot Line?
The Maginot Line was a defensive zone that was built in the 1930s to defend France against the possibility of a German invasion. The zone consisted of underground tunnels, artillery, anti-tank obstacles, and many other defensive structures and stratagems to slow down invading Germans. The Maginot Line stretched for approximately 200 miles, 322 kilometers, near the French-German border. During World War II, when the Germans did invade France, the Germans bypassed the Maginot Line by storming through neutral Belgium. Thus, the Maginot Line had failed its one great test because it was too short. The line was also rendered obsolete by the fact that it did not provide defense against the new modern warfare that included aircraft.
What is the difference between the Greater and Lesser Antilles?
The Greater Antilles refers to the four largest Caribbean islands: Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. All smaller Caribbean islands make up the Lesser Antilles.
Where was the first atomic bomb used on a populated area?
The Japanese city of Hiroshima was leveled by an atomic bomb dropped by the United States on August 6, 1945. 3 days later, the United States dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki, Japan. While these events may have hastened the Japanese surrender in World War II, over 115,000 people were killed immediately due to the blasts, and many more died later due to radiation-related diseases.
How many Native American reservations are there in the United States?
There are 310 reservations in the United States. Although the land is owned and administered by the federal government under the Department of the Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs, each reservation has limited sovereignty, including its own legal system.
What commodity makes the Persian Gulf so strategically important?
The Persian Gulf is strategically very important because a large share of the world's petroleum is transported through it in oil tankers. At the southeastern end of the Gulf is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point that can be, and has been, controlled to prevent ships from sailing in or out of the Gulf.
What transition took place within Hong Kong in 1997?
The sovereignty of Hong Kong, a former British territory, was transferred to China on July 1, 1997. Following the expiration of a 99-year treaty signed by China and the United Kingdom. The treaty gave the United Kingdom the use of the trading port of Hong Kong, as well as a section of land on mainland China known as the New Territories. Since the treaty for the New Territories was due to expire in the late 1990s, the United Kingdom and China entered into negotiations to hand over to China both Hong Kong, covered by an in perpetuity agreement, and the New Territories. China agreed to the terms of the negotiation, which granted Hong Kong special administrative rights, limited sovereignty and self-rule, and allowed its economic structure to remain in place until 2047. Hong Kong was and continues to be one of the most developed territories in the world, as well as one of the great banking and financial centers.
Which member of the United Nations could not serve on the Security Council?
In order to sit on one of the 4 rotating spots on the 9-member Security Council, a member of the United Nations must also be a member of one of 5 regional groups. Israel was not eligible until 2000 because of its hostile relations with Arab nations.
How did the United States reach its present form?
The United States began as 13 British colonies on the Atlantic coast. In 1783, the United States gained the Northwest Territory, the area encompassing what is now Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Spain and the United States agreed on the northern boundary of Florida in 1798, and the United States then took control of the Mississippi Territory. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase, which included most of the area west of the Mississippi, doubled the size of the country. In 1845, the independent Republic of Texas was annexed and Spain ceded Florida to the United States. In 1846, the Oregon Territory, which included Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, was officially designated with a treaty between the United States and the United Kingdom. The Mexican War of 1846 to 1848 led to the secession of California, Utah Territory, and New Mexico Territory to the United States. The Gadsden Purchase of 1853 added southern Arizona. Alaska was purchased from Russia in 1867 and, finally, Hawaii was annexed by the United States in 1898.
Which explorer fought for both the Union and Confederate armies in the U.S. Civil War and went on to discover a famous missing African explorer?
Although born in Britain, Sir Henry Morton Stanley sailed to the United States and worked there for several years before the start of the Civil War. He joined the Confederate Army but was captured in 1861 at the Battle of Shiloh. He then joined the Union Army. Stanley is best known for his search for the missing African explorer, David Livingstone, and his greeting upon finding him, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?"
What are the most heavily urbanized countries in South America?
Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and Venezuela all have an urbanization level, the percent of population who live in urban areas, of approximately 85%, the same percentage as the United States.
What is a refugee?
A refugee is a person who leaves his or her home country for fear of persecution. There are approximately 15 to 20 million refugees in the world today. Most refugees come from developing countries where society is in flux or even chaotic. Refugees usually flee to the closest stable country. So different countries see great variation in the number of refugees based on the political climate of their neighbors. Thus, developed countries consistently have a large number of refugees arriving. Refugees are problematic, just as any mass immigration is.
How did the Black Plague affect the world's population?
Spread by fleas, the bubonic plague, also called the Black Plague, raged through Europe, Asia, and North Africa between the years 1346 and 1350. Those cities attempted to curb the spread of this highly infectious disease by quarantining cities. The fleas easily spread from city to city. Estimates of those killed reach into the tens of millions. In Europe and Asia, more than half of the population died of the Black Plague during those 4 years. Many more died of starvation in the famine that followed. Because of the staggering depletion of the workforce,
What is the largest freshwater lake in the world?
Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It is 31,700 square miles, 82,103 square kilometers in area and is approximately 350 miles, 563 kilometers, long.
How geologically active is Japan?
Both volcanoes and earthquakes threaten Japan. Japan has 19 active volcanoes, several of which have erupted in the last decade. Earthquakes are also frequent occurrences, with many very destructive quakes in the last century. In 1923, a major earthquake, approximately 8.3 on the Richter scale, struck Yokohama and killed over 140,000 people. More recently, in 1995, an earthquake in Kobe killed 5,500 people.
How big is Siberia?
Siberia makes up approximately 3/4 of Russia. Siberia is bounded on the west by the Ural Mountains, on the north by the Arctic Ocean, on the east by the Pacific Ocean, and on the south by China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. Russia conquered the area now known as Siberia in the late 16th century.
How many tectonic plates are there?
There are a dozen significant plates on the planet. Some of the largest include the Eurasian Plate, North American Plate, South American Plate, African Plate, Indo-Australian Plate, Pacific Plate, and Antarctic Plate. Some smaller plates are located between the major plates. The smaller plates include the Arabian Plate, containing the Arabian Peninsula, the Nazca Plate, located to the west of South America, the Philippine Plate, located southeast of Japan, containing the northern Philippine Islands, the Cocos Plate, located southwest of Central America, and the Juan de Fuca Plate, just off the coast of Oregon, Washington, and Northern California.
When were time zones established in the United States?
In 1878, Sir Sanford Fleming proposed dividing the world into 24 time zones, each spaced 15 degrees of longitude apart. The contiguous United States was covered by 4 time zones. By 1895, most states had begun to institute the standard time zones of Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific on their own. But it wasn't until 1918 that Congress passed the Standard Time Act. Establishing official time zones in the United States.
Who's fighting over the Falkland Islands?
The Falkland Islands, also known as Islas Malvinas, located near the southern tip of South America, have long been a source of conflict between the United Kingdom and Argentina. Though the islands have been occupied by the British since 1833, Argentina has claimed the islands as its own since the 18th century. In 1982, Argentina invaded the islands, but the British regained possession within a matter of weeks. Argentina still claims the Islas Malvinas and is pursuing its acquisition through diplomatic channels.
How was the New World divided between Spain and Portugal?
In 1493, Pope Alexander VI divided the New World into Spanish and Portuguese spheres of influence. A line was placed 100 leagues, about 300 miles 480 kilometers, west of the Azores Islands, located several hundred miles west of Portugal in the Atlantic Ocean. Everything in the New World to the east of this demarcation line, which lay off the east coast of South America, belonged to Portugal, while the lands in the west belonged to Spain. Since this division provided little land for Portugal, the Portuguese were dissatisfied. The Treaty of Tordesillas established a new line about 800 miles. 1,300 kilometers, to the west of the old line. Pope Julius II approved the line in 1506.
What does the suffix "stan" mean?
The suffix "stan", as in Afghanistan, means nation or land. Therefore, Afghanistan literally means land of the Afghans.
Which Caribbean country leads the region in tourism?
The Dominican Republic is the Caribbean country most visited by tourists, attracting 1.5 million people annually. The beautiful beaches, clear seas, and tropical climate lure tourists from around the world, but especially from Europe. Jamaica is the second most visited Caribbean country, with 850,000 tourists annually.
Which country is the world's leading coffee producer?
Brazil produces more than 32.6 million bags of coffee beans each year, followed by Colombia, which produces 11.5 million bags.
What South American city has more Japanese residents than any city outside of Japan?
São Paulo, Brazil, has more Japanese residents than any other city outside of Japan. Well over 2 million Japanese live in this urban area. The original settlers 791 farmers traveled to Brazil from Kobe, Japan, in 1908.
How does a city get chosen to host the Olympics?
The International Olympic Committee chooses a city as an Olympic site through a complex process. Cities, and their countries, are judged on many characteristics, including environmental protection, climate, security, medical services, immigration, housing, and many others. Cities eagerly spend millions of dollars in construction and preparation for possible selection as a host city, as an investment in the city's future.
What happened to the Arawaks after Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World?
It is said that when Columbus arrived on the shores of the islands of the Caribbean, there were between 250,000 and 1 million island Arawaks. By the middle of the 16th century, disease, slavery, and outright killing brought the number down to fewer than 500. Today, about 30,000 Arawaks live in Guyana, and there are small populations in French Guiana and Suriname.
What are the Balkan states?
The Balkan states and the Baltic states are two completely different regions. The countries lying on the Balkan Peninsula are commonly referred to as the Balkan states, or the Balkans. The Balkan Peninsula itself lies between the Adriatic Sea, east of Italy, and the Black Sea. The countries on the peninsula include Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Macedonia, Romania, Serbia and Montenegro, Slovenia, and the portion of Turkey that lies in Europe.
How can I obtain a flood map of my community?
The best way to see a flood insurance rate map, firm, for your area would be to contact your local government, their planning or emergency management agency should have the firm maps available. Purchasing them from FEMA is not recommended because the maps change often and are best interpreted by a planning or emergency expert.
How fast do hurricane winds blow?
The strongest hurricanes have winds that reach speeds well over 150 miles, 240 kilometers, per hour.
What are the capitals of Bolivia?
Bolivia has two capitals. La Paz is the administrative capital, while Sucre is the constitutional and judicial capital. Several countries divide national functions between cities.
What are the consequences when glaciers melt?
Glaciers that have melted in the Himalayas, home to the world's largest mountains, have filled up and burst the banks of nearby glacial lakes, filling rivers and causing widespread flooding and death to nearby populations downstream. Similar consequences will likely befall those now living near other glaciers around the world.
What is a plaza?
Most Latin American cities have an open public square at the center of the downtown called the plaza. The plaza is used for festivals and ceremonies and is surrounded by a cathedral and shopping areas.
How old are glaciers?
Glaciers present today were created during the last stage of glaciation. The Pleistocene epoch, which lasted from 1.6 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago.
Was the 2005 New Orleans disaster caused by a flood or a hurricane?
The initial cause of the disaster was Hurricane Katrina, which whipped up tides and surged rain and sea water against a very fragile levee system that protected New Orleans. The city is 49% below sea level, and so when the man-made levees broke, flood waters moved in and inundated much of the city.
What are continents?
Continents are the 6 or 7 large land masses on the planet. If you count 7 continents, these include Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, North America, and South America. Some geographers refer to 6 continents by combining Europe and Asia as Eurasia, due to the fact that it is one large tectonic plate and land mass. So whether you count Europe and Asia one continent or two, divided at the Ural Mountains in western Russia, is up to the individual. Australia is the only continent that is its own country.
Can a woman have multiple husbands?
While some cultures allow men to have multiple wives, there are other cultures that allow women to have multiple husbands. This practice, known as polyandry, is presently observed by only 2 cultures: the Tibetans and the Nair people of southwestern India. polygyny, when men have multiple wives, remains legal in Islamic and many African countries. The collective name for multiple spouses, both polyandry and polygyny, is polygamy.
Who are Kiwis?
One nickname for a New Zealander is Kiwi. But kiwis are also a flightless bird and a type of fruit found in New Zealand. Kiwi birds, a national icon of New Zealand, have long thin beaks and lay eggs larger in proportion to their body size than any other bird. Most of the world's supply of kiwi fruit is also grown in New Zealand.
Who speaks Swahili?
While approximately 10 million people speak Swahili as a first language, and another 80 million East Africans speak it as a second language, it is not an indigenous language. Swahili is a mixture of Arabic and African languages that gradually developed through trading between Africans and Arabs. Though there are over 1,000 different languages in Africa, Swahili is the second most popular language, Arabic is the first.
Is Singapore a city or a country?
Singapore, a city-state, is both a city and a country, and one of the wealthiest, most developed countries in the world. Born out of the extreme hardship and mass killings of World War II, the country was taken under United Kingdom control after the Japanese defeat. In 1963, Singapore merged with the states of Malaya, Sabah, and Sarawak to form what is Malaysia today. In 1965, Singapore split from Malaysia and formed its own country.
Why would countries want colonies?
Colonies are a source of raw materials, new land, wider trading opportunities, and militaristic expansion for the mother country. Colonies were established around the world from the 16th century through 19th century by powerful Western nations. After World War II, the concept of colonization was widely attacked as an exploitive policy. Though most colonies were granted independence, many countries still control colonies around the world.
How many people in the world are classified as urban dwellers?
%48 of the world, approximately 3 billion people, live in urban areas today. Another 52%, or 3.3 billion people, live in rural areas.
What was the Rainbow Warrior?
In 1985, the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior was in the Auckland, New Zealand harbor when it exploded and sank, killing one Greenpeace staff member. It was later discovered that French secret agents planted bombs on board the Rainbow Warrior. In order to stop the organization from protesting French nuclear weapon tests in the Pacific. Following the incident, the French Minister of Defense and head of the Secret Service were forced to resign. New Zealand, a country very much opposed to nuclear weapons, maintained a poor relationship with France for many years following the bombing.
Where is the center of the contiguous United States?
The geographic center of the lower 48 states is located at 39 degrees 50 minutes north, 98 degrees 35 minutes west. Approximately 4 miles, 6.5 kilometers, northwest of Lebanon, Kansas.
Which states are earthquake-free?
While a 20-year period isn't an excellent indicator, there were 4 states that had no earthquakes between 1975 and 1995, Florida, Iowa, North Dakota, and Wisconsin.
Where is the equator?
The equator is the line located equidistant between the North and South poles. The equator evenly divides the Earth into the northern and southern hemispheres and is 0 degrees latitude.
When was the compass invented?
As early as the 11th century, the Chinese were using a magnetic needle to determine direction. At approximately the same time, the Vikings may have also used a similar device. A compass is simply a magnetic needle that points toward the magnetic North Pole.
Where is Iwo Jima?
Iwo Jima, one of the 3 islands that make up the Volcano Islands, is located southeast of Japan. One of the deadliest battles of World War II was fought on Iwo Jima, with approximately 20,000 Japanese and 6,000 American soldiers killed. The Japanese air base on Iwo Jima was captured by the United States on February 23. 1945. The island was returned to Japan in 1968.
How did the Himalayas form?
About 30 to 50 million years ago, the land mass of India pressed into the land mass of Asia, pushing up land at the place of impact and creating the Himalayas. Even today, as the Indian subcontinent presses against Asia, the Himalayas continue to grow and change.
Who was Ponce de Leon?
The Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon searched for the fountain of youth. In 1513, during his travels in search of the mythical fountain, reportedly located on the legendary island of Bimini, Ponce de Leon discovered Florida.
What is a subcontinent?
A subcontinent is a land mass that has its own continental shelf and its own continental plate. Currently, India and its neighbors form the only subcontinent, but in millions of years, Eastern Africa will break off from Africa and become its own subcontinent.
How much market share does Russia's national airline, Aeroflot, have?
For domestic flights, Aeroflot has a 23% market share of all domestic travel in Russia. Nearly 10 million people fly Aeroflot each year. Siberian Airlines handles more than 3.5 million passengers each year.
How many people live in Moscow?
Approximately 10 million people call Moscow home. Nearly 5 million people live in St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city.